So, welcome to our next episode of the Strategiewerkstatt, our podcast, which is also our hitchhiker's guide through strategy itself. Today with me is Oleksandr, and he has brought a great topic that bridges from startup to larger corporations when strategy become necessary in the end. But before we dive in, who are you and what do you do daily?
My name is Oleksandr Paraska, currently a CTO of B2B SaaS startup Toggle AI, and I'm also doing some minimal consulting in AI strategy in a community called Tribe AI. I'm originally from Ukraine, moved to Germany about 9 years ago, and moved to Germany to work on a German company, but I don't work in a German company anymore. I went through multiple phases of this topic that we'll be discussing when I joined very small companies, and it was like very build, and then like how does it become unscalable without a very cohesively articulated strategy. So that's why I'm interested in this topic. Yeah, I'm in Germany. I have 2 kids. I don't know what else I need to say about myself. No.
Awesome. Yeah, I've 3 kids, so I think it's also always good to mention that we are not only doing podcasts all the day, but there's also like a life after the camera is off, and that's with our families, that's with our kids. So I think that's always good to mention. Yeah, I mean, you triggered already like what you've done so far and like your career path, and the topic that we want to do is like, let's try to phrase it properly.
Okay.
So we could start with what's the moment strategy becomes necessary, or we could maybe phrase it as at which complexity level is a cohesive strategy necessary? Which one resonates more with you?
I'm a big fan of complexity theory, so I will go for the complexity.
With the complexity. Okay. So at which complexity is a cohesive strategy necessary?
That's a good. I wish I knew.
Yeah, sure. That's why we do the podcast.
I think those things when you know it when you see it, and at least in my experience, it was the case when you can still work and then push until some point, and then you see that things stop working out because like different people, different teams start to pull in different directions. So I think when you see this misalignment of the teams, you can use strategy or vision, mission, I don't know, like all of those big words to align the companies. And this, I would use it as a reining complexity tool. So like, because everything is exploding in complexity, you want to start reining that complexity as the time goes by, as the company grows, as anything grows. So I think that's an interesting line of thought where you minimize complexity by giving strategy. Another one is, as any idea develops, whatever you do, you probably either have succeeded or have failed when doing the original idea that the company started with. And you need to understand like where does it all fit in a new change to the domain. So the complexity is also in the outside world. You try to position yourself now after you learned all of these things and have you accomplished all of these things in the new world, and then what should the next thing be? And I think it's a bit of a different thing. It's not a tool to bring organization, to bring order to the chaos or to the complexity. It's a tool to provide more like a vision for yourself to understand, well, is it that we're doing? It's like a more internal introspection tool. What do you think about that? I'm not sure if like I'm going in the right direction. So
I think you started with like one symptom that you see, right? So you said once the company is growing, at the beginning it's big builds in order to keep everything afloat. And then you said one of the first things you see is team misalignment. So teams pulling in different directions, and that's when you start to rein in. Before we go into the complexity inside outside, which is also a nice topic, what other symptoms do you see apart from team misalignment when you realize that's the moment to really start thinking about reining in, about the boundary conditions, or as we might call it, strategy?
I think it's maybe the similar thing, but different people, because they're all experts. Hopefully you hire the people who are better than you and expert in their fields. They see the world from different perspectives because they are experts in their fields and they're not necessarily experts in all the fields. And there comes a point in time where all of the experts tell you what is the right thing to do from their point of view, and it all makes perfect sense. But you as like a person who needs to ingest all of this need to make a decision that is suboptimal from all of those points of view because you want to unify them. And so when you're finding yourself in the position when you cannot accommodate for all the optimal points of view, you have to pick and choose and, prioritize. That's also, I think, a point where you need to like have a strategy because which points are important now versus which points are important later. Yeah, that's maybe a different angle.
Okay. So first is team misalignment. That's when total teams pull in different direction. The second ones is, I think that's interesting from your perspective as a CTO saying, hey, once the experts that are much wiser and much more knowledgeable than I am as a CTO, once they tell me different things and everything makes sense, but they don't like fit together. So that's another symptom to be seen, like especially in your role, to realize, we should have a strategy around here.
Yeah. I think there's a nuance there. So like as a CTO, I don't know how technically you want to go here, but there is this notion of a code smell. You look at code and then
explain code smell.
When it's becoming like you're building things that when you look at the code, it's like, that's not how the good code looks like. It like makes sense as a feature, but it's like the abstraction layers are breaking out or like something is becoming off and you just like you hack things together because it's like the only way how you can imagine you should do it. And so in those situations, in these engineering management situations, like there is this rule of thumb, you should be planning to rewrite all of your code base every 2 years. So you plan for that. And so like that your strategy should be like, whatever you do, you're building these things, but you plan to throw it around, throw it away, and then rewrite it. So your team should be very nimble. You don't want to maintain all of those like gazillion of features that you will want. But because you need to be very nimble in not in keeping your code beautiful, you need to not put features that shouldn't be there. So that's kind of another thing. You just look at the code. Either we spend like a lot of time rewriting this, or you need to have a better
technical depth.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hear that a little bit of code smell is okay because you need to launch new features and you want to be fast and you want to be an early mover in the market. But if the code starts to stink, then that's another symptom when you say this is now we need some guiding rules. Now we need some strategy to hold it together.
I think so. Yeah.
Cool. So we have these symptoms: team misalignment, different expert views, and code smell. That's awesome. Now let's go back to complexity. And you said before, strategy helps to minimize complexity. Why does it help to do so?
There's many ways I can go there. Globally,
what's the first thing you think about?
Yeah, globally, I think other than being a fan of complexity theory, also I'm a fan of Wardley Mapping. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yep. Yeah.
But I'm familiar in that sense is that I see it as like a generalization of a Moore's law. Basically, the idea is that everything moves from being highly bespoke solution, like very tailored to a very specific use case, to being a very like off the shelf and maybe even you can get it for free. So like everything will move somewhere from being very complex to being like, here it's available, do whatever you want. And all software will move that way. At least I'm talking in this situation about software. I don't really know if that's okay.
It's fine.
But if you have that point of view in mind, that if you invest a lot of resources in a thing that will be very available for everyone for free very soon, you're like losing out on the cycles that you could have used to make it more productive. So my mind immediately goes, if you just try to build lots of custom bespoke solutions for all of the possible things, 2 years down the line, you would have just got it for free. And then you spent a lot of the sleepless nights for nothing really. If you don't pick the right thing to build, you don't strategize what is the thing that is really different. You can make an bet that this thing that we are working on is going to be still useful in 2 years, in 5 years, or something like that. And that's becoming more and more challenging, I think. My point of view, going back to AI, is I think software itself becomes even more easier to write. It's still not super easy, but easier to write. And then if you go it and move it to the limit, it probably is going to, like in the limit, the price of software is going to zero. So what's becoming more important is the strategy. Is like, what is it the thing that does, not how does it do it? And that becomes a purely strategic question. It's a aesthetic perception versus like technical complexity. You cannot hide in technical complexity. You just need to build out this strategy.
So is it fair to say, and I'm trying to paraphrase, if it feels like working on the weird stuff, is that where the magic happens in strategy? I'm thinking about your move from like complexity into complicated, into simple, into commodity. I mean, that's the path you would normally take. And if you do like the standard stuff, it's not weird. It feels natural. It's described. There are standards around it. But on the other edge, if you work on the complexity field, there's no answer given. So there's no prescribed answer. You have to find your own answer to that solution. And that's it. How does it feel like this moment in time when you build that strategy from this complexity perspective? That's also a weird question, but
I think that's a very good point. So you want to stay there in the complex field. At least I think it's also maybe like a personality thing for some people. Thrive in different situations, but you want to stay in complex area because that's where most of the possibilities lie. You know, if it's going into a commoditized area, and you just need to execute. And so there's not much need to strategy there. I think strategy has already been figured out by just defining the thing that you want to do. Because you want to stay in complex field and everything moves into commoditized, you want to position yourself in such a way that you constantly discover new complex things. You swim against current in a way, and that's a thing that is very hard to build in an organization, where you're not connecting yourself to any one product. You're connecting yourself to ways of discovering new ideas. And so that's like a meta strategy in a way. You are building a machine that discovers more strategies. Or maybe that's a way of working. I don't really know if you discuss it in strategy, but that's kind of how I see it. If you do want to go into like see it all the way from moving from complex into commoditization, then this is where strategy as an alignment is very important, because you have discovered that this is this thing you're building. No one else has all of the context.
You said it's not about connecting to the product. It's about connecting to the way to discover new things. And it's a super powerful statement. A lot of companies that also we work with, they build strategy around the product they want to sell or the service they provide. But you are telling now it's about we should connect and strategize and systemize ourselves around this discovery thing, because that's where the next opportunity lies. So how do you bring this idea into your startup? How do you connect this idea with your teams and your organization?
Yeah, I think it's a bit bi-directional. So it's not only you're building this thing that discovers new ideas, you also have to have like a big, hairy goal.
BHAG,
you know it will not happen like the next 10 years, but that's what everything is going to. And because you are aligned on this like bigger vision, you anticipate the things that you will want to learn, and then you kind of are positioning yourself, aspiring yourself to that direction. It's not this completely directionless, just let's build the most product thing. It's a thing about, there is this book.
Which one?
In I think University of Chicago, Agnes Callard. She wrote a book about aspiration and what does it mean aspire. It's not wanting thing, because it's a weird concept. Like to aspire to be a musical player, you don't know what it is to be a good musical player. You just know to be a person who is able to play music. And so it's one of those things where you want to aspire to something that you don't know what it is to be like. So, it's like, it's calling you, it's not you, you emerge from the complex philosophical point.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what the BHAG, the Big Hairy Audacious Goals, like stands for, right? It's an aspiration. I'm just turning over that word because we use North Star and like vision, mission, purpose, right? But calling it aspiration and then putting it in the context of that's a state I don't even know how to describe. So it's something I totally don't understand. But it's concrete enough to like give me direction towards that goal, right? Being a musical player. So I certainly should not start cooking, right? If I want to be a musical player. So I should do some music there.
It's like, you know what that state is. Another example is like becoming a parent. You probably, like, some people want to become a parent. I have no idea what it is to be a parent. I mean, you're
So
like, oh,
true. It's so true.
but you have the aspiration to be a parent, and why, you don't know. And so it's like the same with organization. Organization has a big North Star, hairy goal. Like, we want to be there. We don't know what it will take. And probably if we knew what it would take, it would be not worth it because it's so hard. But it's one of those things.
Or if we knew it, it would be too easy, so others can also do it. Right? I think this is also the other side of the coin. Yeah? Wow. Okay. So super. I like it. I will clearly think about aspiration today and tonight and over the next days. What you also said before was something that interests me as well. You said about complexity inside and outside. So yes, outside we are in an environment, and now it's with AI and all the new tools coming out. Like now we have even more tokens in the paths. So and there's even more context we can give into the models, right? So it's crazy fast. So this is outside complexity. We don't know what the next thing after AI agents will be or generic AI will be. So this is super complex. But then there's also the internal complexity. Your teams need to grow, their skill to be grown. How do you connect those two with each other?
I mean, I can tell you how I try to. I don't know if I'm successful. So
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I think even whatever the complexity is, there is still some basic things that you can make bets on. And there are still bets, but you can make a bet that, there will be still need of humans to do work. It's like a very basic thing, but you can make that bet. Stuff like it's like, I think what Amazon's founder was making a bet. People will probably always want to have cheaper things or deliver them faster. It's like a very basic bet, but you can find those kinds of bets in all sorts of situations. And then that's the base layer. And from there, you can just let it flow a bit. From my perspective, in the industry, we're in construction industry. People will probably be still building houses. You can make that bet. You remove some layers of complexity because you don't want to doubt everything. And just by removing those things, you're making these assumptions more conscious. Yes, we are making a bet that people will want to build houses. And then you can add more and more things to this. And then at some point, you'll make assumptions that are questionable. Like some people on your team will like, I'm not sure if this is happening. That's where, okay, this is something we need to test. But you try to make as many assumptions as possible and see where you get pushbacks. That's for outside. For inside complexity, I think the answer is culture. And yeah, it's about again, letting off control, but giving very clear guardrails. So at least for how I see it is you want to give as much context as possible to people who are making decisions and let them make decisions and judge them on the way how they make decisions. Don't get in the way. And so by moving that complexity to organization level, you don't have like a single point of failure where one person needs to make a decision and nobody can have all of the access to all of the things that they need to make an educated guess. So that's it. But culture is the answer because you always need to have like close collaboration between organizations. It's like a layer of Blanken, an English word, where you it's a free flowing layer between the structures that you're building in an organization. So I think cultivating the culture, and it's not that you're building it, it's just it happens to the organization, is important.
Yeah, I think that's also a good final statement. Culture happens to organizations. Yes, you can prune it a bit, you can shape it a bit, but you cannot introduce a culture. So culture happens to an organization.
It's actually interesting. I'm originally from Ukraine, and then in Ukraine, it's like an Eastern European country, right? In universities, we have a subject called culturology. So it's like a science culture, and we study culture. And it was one of my favorite subjects in the university. And I moved here, and I was like, I wonder, who is the best culturologist here? And just it's not a thing. People don't have that.
What?
Yeah, and so I find it interesting. But culturology maybe is a bit like a socialist term. I don't know, but it's a fascinating topic. I don't think you can change it, but you can study it. And by studying it, you can at least use it to your advantage. So you cannot change the culture, but you can leverage the culture to achieve things that you want.
That's a wonderful end to this episode. I learned a couple of things, probably much more than I can state now, because this was really a wonderful episode. So the first thing I learned is 3 symptoms when a startup or a scale up or any company should have or should start to think about strategy. Team misalignment, experts tell you things that make sense, but you can't bring them together. And the third thing
Right.
is code smell, right? So when the code stinks, that's another moment to start strategy. And the second thing I'm even more powerful is this term aspiration, right? Let's exchange, let's do a thought experiment. And that's what every one of our listeners can do now. Exchange your word vision or BHAG in your next discussion with your team by the word aspiration, and then see what happens. Right? Oleksandr, thanks for this episode. I keep my fingers crossed that your startup will start to or continue to grow and like really scale like crazy. And I wish you all the best. Thanks for your inspiration and your ideas. Thank you.